So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and very, very welcome to the House of Sweden. It's such a wonderful pleasure and honor for me to welcome you all here this afternoon to the 2014 Nobel Laureate Symposium. And we have the great honor of having all the four Americans who got the Nobel Prize this year. We have in physics, Dr. Shuyi Nakamura. We have in chemistry, Dr. Eric Betzig, and Dr. W.E. Murner, and in medicine, Dr. John O'Keefe. And I think we'll give them a great round of applause immediately. It's become a tradition to have the U.S. laureates of the Nobel Prize come to Washington, D.C. to a meeting with the president. And we just back from the White House, and I can tell you this was an upper for the president, as Dr. Holder, the science advisor of the president, said after the meeting. I mean, there are lots of downers for being a president, but this was a distinct upper, and I can testify that was really the case. It was a wonderful occasion to discuss science and research. And now it's our turn to welcome the laureates here to the House of Sweden. Also very glad to welcome the spouses, the families of the laureates, and this is an opportunity for us to also have them come to the residence for a dinner tonight. Both of these events are co-hosted with the Ambassador of Norway, and so I'd like to thank my colleague Kåre Aas for your cooperation and for the work that your staff have been doing as well. Thank you so much. Now, this is also an opportunity for the laureates, although some of them have been working together for many years, but laureates and their families to meet for the first time before going off to Stockholm. It's a bit of a dress rehearsal before they go to Stockholm and experience what it is all about there in a couple of weeks' time. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it very much. It's usually a good party in Stockholm those days, and as you will probably know as well, all Sweden is watching what's going on that very day of the 10th of December when you receive the prize, including in the evening when you're eating your dinner. Now, the idea of this symposium this afternoon is that those of us who are not experts in the field of physics, chemistry, and medicine, that we can learn a little bit more about the work of the laureates in layman's terms. It gives the laureates a bit of opportunity to postulate about the achievements that they have been making and how those could impact society. And research indeed lays the foundation for the development of knowledge in society. In Sweden, I'm happy to say, has a long tradition also of putting science, research and innovation, and maybe most importantly, education, high on the political agenda. And there is no coincidence that we today earn, together with Norway, top positions in numerous international rankings of innovation and excellence. At the same time, we need to improve our results, not least in undergraduate education. So there's some work to do as well, no question about that. Now, our passion for and devotion to science, research, innovation, and education is shared not only by Norway, but also by the United States, the greatest science nation in the world. And the country has produced, including the four great men on stage here today, an imperative 354 Nobel laureates, an impressive number to say the least. And now, over to the conversation, and for 8 years in a row now, Dr. Alan Leshner has agreed to moderate the discussion. Dr. Leshner is CEO for the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the executive publisher for Science. And before joining AAAS, Dr. Leshner had a long and distinguished career at National Institute for Health, National Science Foundation, and in academia. You know, Alfred Nobel once said that if I have 1,000 ideas, and only one turns out to be good, I am satisfied. And given this, I believe that you all on stage today must have had millions of ideas since the one that you proceeded with turned out to be so incredibly brilliant. Dr. Leshner, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and the rest of you. Good afternoon. Okay, this is a great event. It's actually my favorite event of the year. You get a chance to have at the Nobel laureates. Let's have a little more enthusiasm. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Actually, I was thinking while the ambassador made the comment about uppers and downers, two things are relevant here. I When I was at NIH, I was the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, so that the conversation about uppers for the president and downers for the president sort of resonated with me. I have no idea why. This is a terrific event, and it's wonderful to be here in the beautiful house of Sweden. And I do have to do my usual routine for those of you who've been here before, and that is the view can be extremely distracting. It's beautiful, it's lovely. I had occasion to actually be up on the roof, and it was spectacular. So may I suggest that everyone take a moment, look to your right or left, have an admiring view, and then pay attention to these guys after that. The second thing I'll mention is after I ask each of them to make a little bit of a statement, it would be appropriate for you all to have at them, and you can ask them any reasonable question. But I would like to just make the point that we at AAAS have something called the definition of a question. Question is short. It does not have a preamble, and your voice goes up at the end. So if you could restrict the speeches to here, and you all focus on the questions. Okay, I have asked the laureates to do basically what the ambassador suggested, and that is to just take a couple of minutes each and say something about their work and what its significance is for normal people like us. And so I think we'll start with that, but while you're at it, be thinking about what's on your mind when you have an occasion to interact with them. You go first.
Thank you very much.
Good, Dr. John O'Keefe.
So, I received the prize for discovering that cells in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is in the temporal lobes, which is right inside your temple here, have a very specialized function. Their job is to provide information about where you are, and to tell you where other things in the environment, other things are. When I first started looking at the hippocampus many years ago, we kind of knew that it was a memory system. And we knew this because there was a particular famous patient called HM, or Henry Mollison, as he's now known, who had been studied quite extensively in Montreal by a professor called Brendan Milner, because he had a fantastic deficit. He had epilepsy, and he was operated on for the epilepsy, which involved removal of portions of his brain on both sides of the brain, and in particular this part of the brain that I'm interested in, the hippocampus. And after recovery from the surgery, his epilepsy was ameliorated. He actually had fewer fits and could live a more normal life, but he had a very, very severe amnesia. He had lost his ability to remember things in the past that had occurred to him and to form new memories. So before I started studying this area in the rat, I knew that it was probably some kind of a memory system, but I didn't know what kind of a memory system it was. So when I started recording from single cells as the animal went about its daily business, I was prepared to see that it was any kind of a memory that you could imagine. And I was a bit surprised to find that it actually was a memory for space. One cell would fire when the animal went to this part of the environment, another cell would fire when it went to that part of the environment. And if you added up the activity of large numbers of cells, they covered the entire environment. So it occurred to me that this would be a plausible substrate for a cognitive map, a map of an environment which told the animal and us where it was, where other things that were important in the environment, so that the animal could find its way there, and how to navigate between where it was now and where it wanted to be. Do you want me to say something about why this is important?
Yeah.
So I think this was, it turns out that these cells can tell where the animal is by combining information from lots of different other parts of the brain. They take information in from the sensory array, So the animal can look around and say, well, I'm allowed to do this. You can't, but I'm allowed to do this. There's the river over there, and there's the entrance over there, and there's the ceiling, and it can use sensory information to identify its location, because each location is identifiable by a unique set of sensory information. But it also has a second system, which it uses to complement this system and to corroborate this system. This is a system which tells it how to identify where it is on the basis of where it's just been. So I know that I'm sitting here, and if I get up and I walk down to the end of the auditorium there and then turn right, I'll be able to predict what places I will encounter along the way and what information I'll see. And we're now beginning to realize that this is a general system for how a lot of different parts of the brain work. They put together in a very cognitive way information both from the environment, which tells me where I am right now, and also predictive information, which tells me where I'm going to be. So there's an expectancy function. So this was one of the first areas which we began to understand how that operated. The other reason it's important is because although we didn't actually know this when we first started studying, I'm a pure scientist. I'm interested in how the brain works, and I do it really out of curiosity. It turns out that this part of the brain is one of the first that's attacked by Alzheimer's disease. It turns out that when you first see the signs of Alzheimer's in patients, the plaques and the tangles, which are the signature pathology of Alzheimer's, this is the first place you see it. So by having a basic understanding of how this area works normally, we can now use that information to begin to see how it begins to go awry in animal models of Alzheimer's, and also to begin to think about how we can test for Alzheimer's patients at the earliest stages. We hope someday we'll have cures or ways of ameliorating the disease, but to do that, we need to get there and intervene right from the earliest stage. And it's with these tools, studying spatial memory, trying to have very sensitive tests for spatial memory in humans as well as animals, that we hope to be able to identify that subset of patients who are particularly at risk for Alzheimer's.
Terrific. Dr. Moner.
Well, my part of this story goes way back into the mid-'80s when I was working at IBM Research, and the story is about single molecules. So if you think about this glass of water, there are roughly 10 to the 25th molecules of water in this glass of water, one followed by 25 zeros. And my postdoc and I figured out a way to detect one molecule at a time. And you might say, well, this is a very esoteric thing. Why would you possibly want to do that? But it turns out that in complex environments, such as solids, polymers, and cells, single molecules are behaving, and they're doing things by themselves in perhaps different ways. So the point of all this work was to first detect single molecules, and that was, of course, an ultimate. But as soon as you look in a new regime, you see surprises. Some of the molecules were jumping around. Some of the molecules were turning on and off. Some of the molecules were blinking and could be controlled with light. And so using light to detect molecules and see these changes, both in a low temperature in a crystal or in a fluorescent protein, is a way to have a little light source, like a beacon inside the cell that can tell you where things are. And it's because of these objects being like tiny light sources inside complex environments that we can learn something about how the system actually works on a fundamental level, and with implications for cell biology and disease and in other areas of science.
Good. That was crisp. I have questions for you, but I'm holding them. Dr. Betsy.
Maybe I'll take up all his time. Anyway, the field that W and A are both getting the prize in, it relates to these super resolution microscopes. So as you probably know, electron microscopes have been able to look down to almost the atomic level for about as long as I've been alive, if not longer. But they put the samples inside a vacuum and bombard them with ionizing radiation so you can't look at living things. And so when I entered grad school, we're both Cornellians, in '82, there were a couple guys who were interested in making a super resolution microscope that would have the resolution of an electron microscope, but the ability then to look at live cells this way. And I said, well, that sounds really cool, so I chose that project. I did that for my thesis, ended up taking that to Bell Labs and was at Bell Labs for 6 years with my own lab. This was a technique called near-field microscopy. It had some successes. Among other things, we could see single molecules at room temperature and find their positions to on the order of 10 nanometers. But in the end, it turned out not to be a good tool for biology at all. And since that's really what I wanted to do with my life, I got fed up and I quit science altogether in the early 90s. And so shortly after I quit, I was able to flush a lot of that old information out of my head, which is useful when you're unemployed. And then I realized that you could take an experiment, there was another experiment I did with a friend at Bell about looking at semiconductors, similar to what we'll hear about in a minute, and doing spectroscopy on that and how you could combine that with the optics to make a different kind of super resolution microscope. So I published an idea on that microscope, but the actual ability to do that at the time wasn't really there, and I was sick of science anyway, so I just published the paper and left it at that. Worked for my dad's machine tool company for about 7 years in Michigan, and failed spectacularly in business, probably more so than I did in science. And then decided I wanted to get back into science because the grass was greener over there. And then when we heard about these, my buddy who had done that semiconductor experiment with me had also left Bell and had also gone industry, also got a solution, also quit. And so we were working together to find out what to do next. And we visited a place where we learned about the switching behavior that WE described of these molecules. And the light bulb went on our heads because that was the only thing that was missing to make the idea I published in my first round of unemployment to work. And so we dropped everything and said, well, we know what we're going to do. So we put $25K each of our own money in it, built the microscope in his living room. And then I had an interview at NIH, and I talked to one of the first innovators of these types of switchable proteins there and formed an alliance with her and another guy there. They're here today too. And then Harold and Jennifer and George and I made this microscope, published that in 2006. And so that idea paper in '95 and then the demonstration in 2006 was what got me in this chair today. In terms of why it's important, I guess, again, I'm not a biologist, I'm really an engineer, but the way I think of it is I think looking at biology from outside of biology, I think of that parable of the blind man with the elephant and how everybody's looking at a different part and here's the trunk and here's the tail. Well, molecular biologists have a certain paradigm by which they view biological systems, a very successful paradigm since Watson and Crick and onwards. Biochemists have another paradigm where they grind up the cell, put it in columns and in Western blots, and learn about protein pathways that way. And biologists at different levels have these paradigms, and cell biologists tend to look at whole cells and look at them from the top down, starting to look at a developing organism and then start trying to see more and more detail inside of single cells. And so I think the promise of these super resolution tools is to kind of act as a way of tying these different paradigms together, and in particular tying the paradigm of molecular biology and inanimate molecules. And as an outsider, it seems to me one of the most important fundamental questions we have is how do you go from inanimate molecules and how do they self-assemble by themselves and create this structure called a cell which can reproduce and eat and excrete and move and be incredibly robust under outside perturbation, when at the fundamental level, the story that we've learned from single molecule work like WE's is everything is stochastic at that level. So how do you keep throwing these dice and in the end get these deterministic behaviors? So it's a problem that will, for many years to come, involve biologists, physicists, chemists, and everybody to try to answer that question.
Thank you. I have to say that your journey through the scientific enterprise has been at a minimum interesting. Not sort of the traditional path, I think.
Yeah.
Please, right. Dr. Nakamura.
So my invention is a high efficient blue and white LED. And So another two Nobel laureate in physics, they invented the first PN junction gallium nitride based LEDs. That one is very dim. Out power is order of microwatt. So my contribution is I invent the indium gallium nitride materials in '92. These materials emit a very strong emission at room temperature in spite of the huge number of crystal defects. Because currently available blue and green LED, or green and blue LED grown on sapphire substrate. So due to the heteroepitaxial growth, there are huge number of dislocation density. Dislocation density is order of 10 to the 9th. So when I started blue LED research in '89, all of scientists' common sense was dislocation density should be less than 10 to the 3rd to make high efficient LED or reliable LEDs. At that time, 10 to the 9th, it's crazy. So, but when I invented the indium gallium nitride in '92, indium gallium nitride can emit a very, very strong emission in spite of a huge number of dislocation density. Then I could make the double structure LEDs, emitting layer indium gallium nitride. Indium gallium nitride is sandwiched by P-type gallium nitride, N-type gallium nitride, and then it could make very high efficient blue LEDs. The brightness is 100 times higher than that of PN junction gallium nitride LEDs. And then we could make we could start a mass production of high efficient blue LEDs in '93. And also we could make high efficient green LEDs in '95. Also we could make blue laser diode using indium gallium nitride based material in '95. Also we could finally make white LEDs using blue LED and phosphor. This white LED used for the lighting application, And then so after in '93, at that time we started mass production of blue LEDs. At that time, coincidentally, all of phone companies started trying to make cell phones. At that time, cell phone, they needed a lighting source which can be operated by battery. Battery voltage 3 volt. At that time, there are no lighting source for cell phone because they try to use a cold fluorescent lamp or conventional incandescent bulb, operating voltage 100 volts. There are no batteries which operate 100 volts. So coincidentally, we developed blue LEDs. So immediately, all of cell phone companies started to use our blue LEDs and also white LEDs for backlight. And then now all mobile devices, iPhone, iPad, all kinds of cell phones use LED lighting. Also TV. TV, initially there is the cold fluorescent lamp for backlight, but the efficiency is very bad. So using LED, white LEDs, they can reduce energy consumption now, I think 1/3 now. And for lighting application, you can see, in comparison of the, conventional incandescent bulb lamp, the efficiency of a white LED is 10 times higher than conventional incandescent bulb lamp. So using white LED, you can reduce the energy consumption dramatically. So recently, DOE estimated how much effect of the white lighting. So DOE estimates. So in current space, now people gradually changing the conventional light with LEDs, with current space. In 2030, DOE estimates we can save $300 billion cash by gradually changing the conventional lighting with LEDs. Also, how much energy reduced is just we don't need the 50 oil power plant in 2020, from now to 2020. We can reduce the 50 number of oil power plant. So it affects a lot, especially for global warming issues. We have global warming issues. So by changing the LEDs, you can minimize the global warming issues. That's it. Thank you.
So while you're deciding your question, and we have microphones that will come around the room, can I just ask a quick question? So you did blue LEDs, and the other twos that you combine it with to make white are red and green? Did I guess right?
Yeah, that is one way. But mainly right now we use a blue LED plus phosphor. Phosphor is excited blue LED, we can get white. That is a most popular technique because it costs much more.
I was trying to figure out whether when you make an LED bulb, they have to have different filaments, the equivalent of filaments for each of the colors.
Yes. Yeah, we can use it, but it costs a lot. In the we can use blue, green, red LEDs to make white, but we need 3 LEDs, so it costs a lot. But all of customer needs a cheap white LED. So
Right.
just blue LED plus phosphor is the most cheapest technology.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Okay. We're ready. You ready? Okay. So who's ready? Please. Wait. We'll give you a microphone. This is being streamed. So we
Okay. As for Dr.
say who you are.
I'm Congressman Rick Larson of Washington State. Thanks for doing what you do. Appreciate it. It's nice to see some results. Actually, the question I had for you is, does the brain map tell you that you're by, for instance, are you next to a tree or are you next to that tree? How does that memory work for your internal GPS?
Right. It uses lots and lots of different information. In fact, the system is wired up so that it will use virtually any information that's available. So if you're next to a tree, it will take information from other parts of the brain which recognize that tree and use that information and combine it with information about other aspects of the environment. I think I've just died here as well. Okay. So the question, I guess, is how specific the information has to be. Does it have to take the information that it's that specific tree, or just it's an oak tree or something like that? For most of the locations that you're interested in, you're probably quite happy to be able to take a generic type of tree, perhaps identifying it as an oak tree. Because if you take that and put it together with the information that you're next to a pond and there's a mountain behind you, that will be sufficient to identify the location.
So, okay, please.
Hi, I'm Dan Vergano. I'm a reporter for National Geographic. I was wondering if the laureates could say a little bit about how you're finding laureate-dom. How is it, this beginning of it striking?
How have these weeks been? You want to go in order?
Fine. Well, I think Eric is the one who's famous for having said that it's a great honor, but that one has to be aware of the possible downsides. We've all been used to doing something a certain way for many years, and then all of a sudden this prize comes along, and it has the potential to change every aspect of your life. I mean, I personally am a bench scientist, and I like working in the laboratory. I like what I've been doing for many years, and I hope to be able to get back to do it. But it's certainly the media attention and the fame that's thrust upon one comes as a bit of a surprise. I think I hadn't realized that it would be that enormous. So that's my take on it, is that it's very nice, but I hope some point in the future it'll abate, and I'll be able to get back to doing many of the things I did before, and which I still enjoy.
Good. Dr. Werner.
So is the audio okay now? So before I comment on that particular question, I just want to thank the ambassadors of Sweden and Norway for hosting us on this wonderful day here in Washington. It's really fantastic. And this business of becoming a Nobel laureate, of course, it's a huge sea change in one's life. And what's going on, of course, is that you become an instant expert on anything you can think of.
Yes. Yes.
I've been asked to comment on the Pope and the Big Bang and evolution and all sorts of things already, even though those are not my fields of expertise. So, I'm hoping to be one of those laureates who doesn't talk too much about what I don't know a lot about. But in any case, one of the exciting things about this is that it does give you a little bit of a pulpit to try to help with our scientific and educational enterprise. We're in the United States greatly in need of improved education and improved numbers of students going into science and mathematics, for example. And I want to also try to support, that is, advocate for a stable funding of fundamental science, even though there's already excellent support from agencies, NIH, DOE, and others that have supported my work. I want to hope that there can be a continued support for fundamental science in the United States.
Good.
And again, on ditto on everything they said. It is an honor, but it is also a pain in the ass. And
Don't spell that.
and hopefully, as they said, it will abate. I guess in terms of the other positives I didn't quite expect, I mean, two that come to mind are you hear from everybody in your past going all the way back to grade school, right? People you've long since forgot about, and as you reflect upon them, you realize that they really actually had a pretty significant impact on how your life managed to do all of these kinetic bounces left and right to get you to where you are today. And it's touching when you think about those people and how well they respond to it. And what's also touching is I'm at an institution, Janelia, that's been around for less than 10 years, and it's a great place, but people who came there kind of took a risk because it's not Stanford and it's not Harvard and it's, and so I'll hear from somebody who's a technician and he says, oh, my parents just called me up. They were just crying. They were so happy because they're able to explain to all of their friends why I came here to Janelia, right? and so I don't really care for the personal fame, but I am glad that all of the people who work with me and who have touched me have been able to benefit from the prize.
Well, as they reflect in they bask in the reflected glory. Don't mess it up. Please, Dr. Nakamura.
Yeah. No, that it's a great honor, but at the same time, a lot of noise from mass media. Especially Japanese mass media. A lot of Japanese follow me. That's a big noise. But also, when I received the Nobel Prize announcement, and same time we were trying to develop next generation solid testing. It's a new technology, almost there. But no prize, this is prize is about the LED lighting. So due to a lot of noise, we have to stop research a little bit. So, but also great thing is at the university, there are many students, and all of my students, I don't know at all, but they say, oh, Professor Nakamura, hi. I don't know that. So it's a great present time, or I don't know. Yeah. So it's amazing. So this Nobel Prize is amazing prize.
So there's proof of the old adage that Nobel laureates are also people. Please.
My name is Bob Kelly, and I'm a K Street lawyer and consultant.
I'm sorry.
Famous. And I've asked this before in years past. Was there one person that, a teacher or some kind of model that influenced you to go the scientific route? And could you say a bit about that person?
Who wants to start? Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I would have to say that it was my father who studied chemistry and physics and got me interested in electronics at a very early age. So my parents provided in this environment that allowed me to play with electronics, play with chemistry, play with lots of things at an early time. And because of, in the 50s, all of the encouragement that was given to students and so forth to go into science, that was incredibly helpful, I would have to say, at a very formative age. That doesn't minimize the impact of, it's the difficulty of these sorts of questions is that what about my mentor and Jim Miller at WashU and my thesis advisor, all of these people had really great influences on me.
I'm really curious about you.
All right. I can.
You've had the more unusual
All right.
career.
Well, if you want to chalk up another spin-off of the space program, it's my sitting here today. Okay, I wanted to be an astronaut. I grew up in the 60s, and that's what got me into science. I didn't have a specific mentor, but if we were doing things right, I'd be having this talk on Mars right now, not sitting here, as nice as the view is. But in terms of, not as a young man, but I have to give a shout out to the guy who was my mentor as an adult, which was Harold Hess, the guy that when I first walked in, whenever you go into Bell Labs, you think that you're under probation because it has 50 years of history, and you think that you don't belong there because you're too, you don't belong with those guys. And there was this guy, Harold, and he took me under his wing, and we did some experiments together. And as soon as I wanted to get back into science, it was Harold and being able to do the experiment gave me the courage. He and I together, I view this prize as much as his as it is mine. I mean, we did the experiments in his living room together, and that's going to be the highlight of my life, And I would be out of science long since if it weren't for him. So he was my real mentor.
Here, here. Anybody else want to comment?
Well, I'm surprisingly also a beneficiary of the space race and the space age. When I left high school and was deciding what to do, the Sputnik had just gone up, and there was a lot of interest in engineering. So I decided to study engineering and studied engineering for several years. And also worked for an aircraft company in Long Island. And it was there that I began to think about and learn about philosophical questions, and began to think about the possibility that with some of the engineering tools that were becoming available, transistors and things such as that, we might be able to begin to tackle some of the age-old philosophical problems, which I've always been interested in, consciousness, perception, and things like that, by using some of the newly evolving engineering techniques. And that's what I did. So I guess I also have a debt to pay to that. I also would like to honor my father, who's a fantastic mechanic, and he always thought I was totally inept. And he once famously said to me, "You'll never make a good mechanic, so you should go to school and become a scientist."
I love it.
I also had lots of people who influenced me along the way and taught me various things, and I'm grateful to all of them. Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so I graduated University of Tokushima. It's so in Japan, top ranking university, the University of Tokyo. University of Tokushima is from the bottom, and it's a local university. And my major was electrical engineering. And after graduating University of Tokushima, I made the decision to stay in Tokushima city. Tokushima is also a very local city. It's a southern part of Osaka. It's located in Shikoku Island. Shikoku Island is the smallest island in Japan. And in Tokushima city, in Tokushima prefecture, there are no big company, but I made a decision to stay in Tokushima. And my advisor recommended the small company. At that time, the number of employees was 200, and the revenue was $30 million US. And coincidentally, I joined the R&D department. So at that time, R&D department, they were making some material. This company is a chemistry company, Nichiya Chemical Industry name is, chemical company. So they are making some material for conventional red LEDs. So I had to study at first for the material department, material development for conventional red LEDs. And then my boss asked me, why don't you make infrared and red LEDs? So I started working on infrared red LEDs. So that's the reason why I have to involve the LED field. But other than chemical company, nobody knows the semiconductor technology, zero. And no equipment. So I have to make everything with a scratch, nothing. So I spent 10 years to develop red LEDs, but already the LEDs are available everywhere, so sales bad. And then, despite that, I started working for the blue LEDs, because at the time, no blue LEDs. So. But in my case, basically, no mentor. Myself, no mentor, zero. And because university, also local university, at that time, no semiconductor technology at the university, so everything I had to develop myself, everything. That's it. Yeah.
I like it. In the back, please. Say who you are.
Hi, my name is Tomoko Horie from Nippon TV. It's Japanese TV network.
They found you.
I understand that you all met President Obama this morning. Can you tell us how was the meeting like and what kind of message the president gave to you all? Thank you.
Please don't reveal any state secrets. Anybody want to comment?
Okay, I can do it. Yeah, so yeah, it's a great honor to see Mr. President this morning. And Mr. President said, oh, you did a great science, something, but he said, I don't know the technology, science at all, but I can understand the LED. Yeah. So he said only, I can understand the LED. So I said, oh, yeah, it's a green technology. So that's the reason you understand it. You recommend it. Yeah, so I'm very happy. He could understand the LED. Yeah.
Anybody else, please?
Well, he also said he was happy to recognize us as scientists to sort of counter a little bit some of the other things that get done for the sports heroes and for the other sort of famous movie stars and so forth that get a lot of the attention in our world.
So I will say, and excuse me for butting in, the President Obama is actually known as a science junkie. I don't know if any of you have ever been to the White House Science Fair. You show up at the science fair and you wind up waiting for a very long time because they can't pry him away from the posters. It's sort of an interesting contrast to some of the other politicians we all know. Okay, please.
I'm Kate Franklin with the State Department and a recent AAAS fellow.
Good. Oh, I'm sorry.
We hear a lot about deficits in funding as limiting to the innovation culture in America. Are there any other major policy barriers that you see, given that you are here in Washington right now, to advancing your work?
Somebody's.
Well,
go ahead. I knew it.
I think a growing source that I'm going to twist your question around. Okay, I've been lucky enough that in my entire career I've not written a single grant. And it's thanks to Bell Labs and then now Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And philanthropy, I think, is becoming increasingly important as a funding source in this country. And if I were going to talk to a young guy who's looking the problem is it's getting so difficult now to get grant money that at many places it's like a 10% success rate. So that means that so many people are just spending all of their time either writing grants or reviewing grants, and it's an incredibly inefficient process. I've found a way through philanthropy to short-circuit that, and hopefully not everybody takes all my money as they come in and follow the same path, but I have found that personally a fruitful path.
Okay, please.
So when you mention policy issues, sometimes there are decisions made which tend to influence where funding gets spent from our federal agencies. And I just believe that there should be a continuous, sustained support for fundamental science and basic research. It's true that applications are also very important, but if there's too much focus on applications and less on the fundamental work, you don't have anything in the pipeline to produce future applications. So I believe that there should be more of a balance and more of a stability in these areas.
Okay, who's next? Sir.
Thank you.
Who are you anyway?
My name's Tom Siebert, and I'm a Washington lawyer and actually admitted at times in public.
Two in one.
Two in one audience. I served as U.S. ambassador to Sweden in the 1990s under President Clinton, and I have a specific question I have for John O'Keefe, but I wanted to say a couple of things about where
No preamble.
where you're going in Sweden. This is one of the great events of all time. My wife and I went to 4 Nobel dinners in Stockholm, and the ceremony, both preceding and succeeding the event, is really extraordinary. I might say also that it was Bill and Hillary who first reached out and decided to bring the laureates, all the American laureates, in December of 1993 to meet them in the Oval Office. Did you all meet in the Oval Office today?
Yes, we did.
Yes. And I'm sure that one of the things you'll find tonight when the ambassadors from Sweden and Norway invite the guests to submit questions to the laureates, since you were with President Obama today, they'll probably ask you whether he disclosed his new Secretary of Defense to succeed Chuck Hagel down there. Anyhow, let me ask a question of John O'Keefe. Your contribution really relates to the inner GPS, which kind of the brain, which addresses the where in the human brain. Where are we and how we come up with this information? Yes. Is there any discipline in science that is focused on the when? That is, how we figure out and remember when things happen in our past? What connects that all up?
Yes, that's a very good question. And there's a bit known, but probably not as much known about the when as about the where. And part of the problem is that there are two kinds of when. There are two ways in which you can register the timing of an event. The most general one is what's called circadian time. This is the time that you have, which is the daily clock, which reflects the fact that we're all living on the planet Earth and it's rotating. So it's a 24-hour clock, and we know where that's actually located in the brain. It's in a different part of the brain, in the hypothalamus. And there are cells there which actually provide the rest of the brain with information about whether it's morning, evening, and night. There's another kind of time, and in all animals, in fact, plants, in fact, it might almost be a definition of a living organism, that it reflects the fact that we are all subject to this 24-hour rhythm. There's another kind of time, which is a linear type of time. So you can think of that as a circular type of time. You have morning, evening, night, morning, evening, night. There's another kind of time, which is linear time, which is the past, the present, and the future. And we have not so much information about how that is encoded in animal brains. We know, obviously, that humans and perhaps primates have this type of time as well. So if you think about having a spatial system, and you take this second kind of time, this temporal system, and you add it to it, then what you have is a spatiotemporal system. You have a system which tells you what you did yesterday, when you did it, with whom you did it. And that's a kind of the basis for a lot of our personal memories, our autobiographical memories. We think that time sense, that second time sense, develops with some of the higher cognitive functions of the frontal cortex. But we're not as comfortable about our knowledge of that as we are of the cyclical time.
Great. Okay, please.
Thank you for this panel. My name is Sumit Kaur. I work in international development at the World Bank. Because we have a panel of scientists, I'm very curious to know if you believe that there is a distinct type of scientific method or scientific thinking. And if you'd like to speak about it, I'm also curious to know if you believe that that type of scientific method can influence non-scientific arenas of life, for example, public policy here in Washington. Thank you.
Who wants to start?
Can I hide behind my chair?
I'm waiting.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll take the first half, and you'll take the second half.
Okay, yeah.
Well, there absolutely is a scientific way of thinking, a scientific method, where we use what has been learned before as facts and produce hypotheses about how to understand the way something works, and then we do testable experiments that let us determine whether that hypothesis is true or false. And it's an issue of testable experiments and testable hypotheses, which you build together to move forward and build on this foundation of what we know as science. And that really is our method. We are always working in this sort of arena where we want to know what's actually true, what's really present, and what's really happening. And sometimes, and that's where the scientific arena works.
Anybody else?
So science is really a very specialized form of what I guess would call rational thinking. It's the thinking which we're all capable of applying to lots and lots of different arenas. And it really is a method for trying to test whether the ideas that you're putting forward actually have some basis in evidence. And it means you have to always be aware of the fact that you could be wrong and try to test whether you're right or wrong, and be willing to accept that you're wrong when the facts go against you. And I think we can apply that to just about any arena in life. I must say, one of the things that I've come to believe is that a lot of science is actually going out there and looking.
Right.
It's really just, there are a lot of problems which we all can accept our problems, but we can't do much about them. And the development of new tools is actually very important. So my fellow laureates here are participating in one of this very important aspect of science, which is to develop a new tool. For example, if you just think about what Galileo did, he got his hands on a telescope called a spyglass, and he just trained it on the moons of Jupiter, and saw something which he hadn't predicted, and which really did puzzle him. And when he began to think about it, he began to see that this actually went against many of the received wisdoms of the time. So a lot of it is just being prepared to look at things with a new, fresh eye, developing new tools so that you can see new things. But then in the end, there is a very, very specific method for deciding whether what you believe is true is actually true. And I think that is the final bottom line of science, being able to confirm or disconfirm your own beliefs.
If I can just add to that, one of the unique things about science is that it's one of the few domains in the world where it's fine to be wrong. It's expected that you're going to fail. And the ability to tolerate that is a trait that is not always easily come by people, even though scientists are, unfortunately, people. Okay. Anybody else? Please.
My name is Jan Johannesson. I'm a scientist at the Food and Drug Administration. I have a question about the imaging techniques. Given the state of art of understanding cell biology, say 10 or 15 years ago, what do you think are a few of the most astounding, perhaps counterintuitive findings that your imaging techniques have revealed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh, wow.
That's fine.
So, go ahead.
Well, I mean, one that we hinted at is we have a much better understanding of how stochastic life is on the small scale through these tools, and that if we've had in our brain since Watson and Crick, right, that you have transcription and translation happening, the RNA and then the proteins, but now we really understand how this happens now at the single molecule level, and again, because these molecules are diffusing, they're stochastic, and these are stochastic events that add up to deterministic behavior. So it's kind of a different way of thinking about the cell than we used to think about, thanks to the development of single molecule tools. And it extends not just in the nucleus, but through all parts of the cell, in the way that G-coupled protein receptors respond to cues on the outside, the way proteins in the membrane diffuse around and find one another, and so forth. So again, I think of these tools really as kind of, again, this bridge between molecular and cellular biology. But more generally, on your question, is one of the things as a tool builder that we have to remember is that you can't build a tool that's going to do everything. Is that as you optimize, say, to space, you lose in time or damage that you do to the cell and so forth. So there's a differentiation of tools that's happening now, and it exceeds across all of biology, not just cell biology. I mean, like what John talked about and being able to make sensitive measurements of cells electrically inside of the brain. There's continuing developments there and so forth. So on all sorts of different levels, there's new engineering and imaging challenges that gives us, again, different types of blind men to look at different parts of the elephant.
Yeah, please.
If I could amplify on some of that, the point about super resolution is that it allows you to see more clearly what you could not see before. So the limit before was 250 nanometers, or about a quarter of a micron. But these new methods, based on super resolution and single molecule blinking and switching and control, get to at least 5 times better resolution. That is, you can see down to, let's say, 50 nanometers or 40 nanometers, and in some cases below that. So what does that really mean? Well, think of a bacterial cell. It's only a couple of microns long and maybe 500 nanometers across. It's already very close to this diffraction limit. So if you use diffraction limited microscopy, you just see a blur. The whole bacterial cell is a blob. But with these new methods, we have now been able to see, in collaboration with my colleague Lucy Shapiro at Stanford, that there are patterns inside the bacterial cell that certain proteins make, certain structures, certain regions where they collect, certain ways in which they move. And it's really very much like if you're looking at a city from too far up, you don't see any detail inside. But when we look down with super resolution, you begin to see that there are characters moving here and there, cars moving here and there, players that are all doing their business or have certain shapes and structures. So it's a very exciting time, because many of the previous sort of paradigms and things that were understood in, let's say, cell biology have to be explored again to see what surprises occur now that you can see it more deeply. Xiaowei Zhuang saw banding in actin filaments. It was a great surprise and very exciting development. And there's just an example after example of new things that have been observed inside cells using these super resolution methods.
You know, one of the things we all were taught was that science drives new technology development.
Mm-hmm.
But what these folks have actually done is drive science with technological development and enable entirely different kinds of questions to be asked that we never could ask before. And it's really a remarkable achievement to come up with these actually targeted technologies that then have that very broad science accelerating effect. It's a fabulous advance. What else? Please.
Lynette Madsen, National Science Foundation. So I have a question for the panel. If you had just 2 or 3 minutes with a young scientist, what advice would you give her?
I like that question. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, that's a great question, and I love the question, because my advice is learn as many different fields of science as you can, because there are exciting things happening at the boundaries between the disciplines. I was first going to college as an engineer, added on physics and mathematics, and then learned about chemistry, and now we're doing biology. So the point here is that if you can learn about the beauty of the things that are common amongst the different sciences, you can learn things that will remove the boundaries between these various areas. And my other main advice really is you've got to keep that fire that says, I want to understand how this works. I want to take it apart and understanding everything about how it works. And that's something that's driven, I would say, all of us in our drive for understanding how nature works on a global scale.
Anybody?
Yeah, I think the most important question relates a bit to that, is to actually decide what the problems are that you're going to study, and to not jump in and just grab the problem that's in front of you. Because, of course, one of the most important things you can do is to find a field which poses problems which are answerable, with either with techniques that you already have or techniques that are being developed. So I think that looking around and thinking very hard about where these questions are, it's not easy, and of course many times one gets it wrong. But that's probably the most important question that you can pose to yourself and try to answer is where are the tractable problems.
I would say to a young scientist, Do the thing that you're passionate about. There's actually quite a few people, say at the graduate school level, who are still, in my opinion, a little bit on autopilot and are in it because they were good at science when they were younger, or their parents want them to be scientists or whatever. I think everybody should choose the path, whether it's, making music videos or working for a newspaper, whatever that they're passionate about. Because the other aspect that you need to succeed in any discipline is hard work. And it's a lot easier to work hard when you're passionate about something, because then it doesn't feel like work, it feels like play. And then the last aspect is being really self-critical, to be your own toughest critic of your work, and so that when it becomes public to other people, it's polished and it's good, and it's something you can be proud of and is somewhat inassailable to attack.
Okay, so my suggestion is just take a risk and the challenge is to abnormal thing, because when I started working for blue LEDs in 80s, there are two kinds of materials. One is zinc selenide based material, another one is gallium nitride based materials. So all over the world, many scientists were working to develop blue LED at the time. Almost more than 99% scientists selected zinc selenide based material. Only less than 1%, only few group in the world selected gallium nitride. And now, using gallium nitride based material, we can make a very high efficient LED, because we took risk and we try to select an abnormal material. Because at the time, I told you, dislocated density, in order to make reliable, high efficient LEDs, dislocated density less than 10 to the third. Zinc selenide material already dislocated density 10 to the third at the time. Gallium nitride dislocated density more than 10 to the ninth. If people select dislocated density more than 10 to the ninth, those scientists are crazy. At that time, they are famous applied physics data journal. They are very famous paper. Very famous science said dislocated density should be less than 10 to the third to make high efficient LEDs and reliability. That's a common sense all over the world among scientists. So gallium nitride, if people select gallium nitride, those scientists are crazy. In Japan, there are big conference. All the scientists work with zinc selenide, and gallium nitride were few people at that time, and the zinc selenide people, who is working on gallium nitride? Oh, those guys are crazy, something like that. So I think most important, young scientists have to try the abnormal thing, and abnormal thing, but take a risk, and the return is huge, but almost fail, Yeah,
that's an important point about what we're now calling transformative research as a way to have a euphemism for high risk, high payoff, high potential failure. And the truth is, most major big changes occur through transformation, through transformative innovation. Barbara, you had a question.
Hello, my name is Barbara Embaum, and I'm the chairman of something called Swedish American Life Science Summit. I live in New York for many years, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting me down here every year. It's fantastic, and I do tend to pick up people from here to come and be a guest, as Alan knows, in Stockholm at our summit.
Careful.
I have a question, though, for you, Dr. O'Keefe. In Sweden at Karolinska, we have a very fine institute for Alzheimer. And the Alzheimer Center at Karolinska this year got a gold medal, supposedly being the best center in Europe. And Professor Bengt Windblad, who you probably know of, is sort of world famous. And we have another Swede, of course, at Eli Lilly, who's very involved with these things. And I'm also involved with Buck Institute and know a little bit what they do. And I'm very familiar with Alzheimer. I care a lot, and I've had it in the family and so forth. And so far, they tell me the best they come up with is a cocktail of various medicines to slow down the process. I don't know when you did. I mean, I love what this is called. To me, being an economist and not a scientist, Inner GPS sounds like a great title of a new book or a very interesting poetic movie or something. I don't know when this happened, but can we now anticipate something exciting in the treatment of Alzheimer's?
That's a very loaded question. And we've learned from our colleagues in cancer research to be very cautious about,
Yes.
about making predictions about when practical results will issue from basic research. But I think there is steady progress being made. And I think that we are now coming to some models of how the cells that are affected in Alzheimer's are actually being affected by, we know some of the genetics of it from a small number of families who have a very strong genetic component, not all families do. So we're able to produce animal models which don't have the full-blown disease, but show some of the aspects of it, and we can study how the disease progresses in those animals. And in the end, a lot of our advances in biology come from having animal models of the process and then using those animal models. So I think we can see, yes, a new dawn in the study of Alzheimer's. I think there is a renewed interest by governments to put money into it. I had the honor of seeing President Obama previously, and he said he was very, very interested in putting more money, and the government should put more money, because if the money that's put in now, if we don't cure it, we will have an epidemic in the next 20 years, and then the amounts of money that it will cost society in general are really going to be astronomical.
Please.
My name is Errol Levy. I'm a science counselor at the EU delegation to the US. I have a question about international collaboration in science. So to our laureates, given that science is globalizing and more of the high-impact research is being done in collaborations, including across borders, do you have an opinion on the value and importance of international collaboration in science, research, technology, and innovation? And did it play any part in the discoveries for which you're being honored?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. The opinion, of course, that it's wonderful. The international collaborations and international connections come from many different sources. Graduate students come to Stanford to study and get PhDs from all over the world, and many other universities, of course. Postdocs come from many areas in the world. And in particular, the postdocs, several of them that I worked with on the original discovery of the single molecule was done with a postdoc from Germany, for example, Lothar Kador. So in the sense that the international enterprise is interconnected, there have also been collaborations after that with other research groups in the Netherlands and France and Sweden and other places that all contribute to pushing science forward, because the problems are complex enough that we need ideas from all directions to push science forward.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, so somebody already told. So it's now very difficult to get a grant from the government or military, even for our LED technology. LED technology is more application oriented, but it's very difficult to get a grant. A lot of proposals, a lot of documentation. Still, we cannot get a grant. But right now, we are most of research funding comes from international collaboration with other countries, companies, industries, through international collaboration. So intercollaboration is very important for us to get research funding right now. So from US government, we cannot get any funding. It's very difficult, getting funding. So most important international collaboration in our case, no doubt. 100%.
Maybe we'll take one or two more. I have to ask this question of Dr. O'Keefe. So My wife has a terrible sense of direction. She's not here, and therefore, and please don't mention it. What do you think? Do you think? Really, my question has to do with interventions. The more we understand about the brain, the more we think about ways in which we could enhance cognitive function or we could manipulate cognitive function. So you work in a rather unusual domain. Do you have anything to say about?
Do you want me to talk about your wife first?
No, please. No, I'm afraid she'd hear it. Smell it on my breath.
So I should say, by the way, that there's a story out there that females are not as good as males at spatial navigation. Whenever people have looked carefully at it, it's a very, very messy literature. But it turns out that the best work on it suggests that females and males pay attention to slightly different things in the environment to use in order to locate themselves. And so, and specifically females tend to use landmarks and large objects, and they also are much better at language, so of course they can describe to themselves, so they have a bit of an advantage that way. Males tend to look at the shape of the environment. So in experiments in which you bias the experiment towards finding your location by looking at the shape of the environment, then males do better, and if you bias it the other way, then females do better. So it's
I got it.
She's not. She's not worse than you are. Yeah.
She's different.
Your other question was
cognitive enhancement.
Cognitive
or manipulation, right? You've got this mechanism, right? And once you've identified the mechanism, the temptation is to have at least the capability to manipulate it.
Yes, so there is a view that the brain is working pretty well as it is already, and that some of the cognitive enhancers are really ways of bringing it up to optimal function. The idea that you might actually be able to create superhuman beings or super cognitive processes, I think is probably a bit overblown. I think we're still a long way from that. You can change the amount of one particular transmitter, and that advantages some cells, but then that disadvantages other cells. So I think the idea that there would be general cognitive enhancers is probably still, at least in my opinion, a bit in the future, if at all.
I just thought I'd throw that. Anybody else? This has been a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful session. Please join me in thanking the new class of Nobel laureates. I also want to thank our hosts, the Ambassador of Sweden, the Ambassador of Norway. Thank you for a wonderful venue. You have all been extremely well behaved. I have been looking at who's turning right while they're sitting here. Thank you, everybody, for a very stimulating afternoon, and particularly thank you to the laureates. Thank you, everybody.